So now I'm excited to welcome our next speaker. When we pull together the programming, we're always looking for an inspirational keynote. And this year, we're lucky to have Jamey Stillings. The inspirational keynotes are really meant to help us explore the underpinnings of major cultural and societal transformations. And I can't think of anyone better than Jamey for this purpose. His photography chronicles the mass adoption of renewable energy and its impact on our shifting human landscape. So please join me in our final morning session, at least Pacific time, with an exploration of awe-inspiring images, which I think you're going to all love, from Santa Fe-based photographer Jamey Stillings and his Changing Perspectives project. Jamey, take it away.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Well, 2 years ago, a large manila envelope arrived to my mailbox. A Glimpse of Tomorrow, a paper written by a college freshman for an English lit class. The paper shared a day in the life of a family in the near future. Their house was powered by solar panels with storage, backed up by a renewable energy from the grid. Glass, metal, and paper were reused or recycled, and the use of plastic was discouraged. The country had a nearly complete rail and bus network, and inner-city mass transit was free. The family, though, still had a decade-old electric car for trips to nature. They lived in a community with homes built close together, so the remaining land could be used for a community park and family gardens. Well, that college freshman was me, and the forgotten paper was written in 1974. I'm what Christiana Figueres calls a stubborn optimist. When pondering climate change, we spend much of our time and energy focused on problems and what we have to give up to move towards ecological health and a sustainable civilization. I think we should view this point in human history as an exciting opportunity to transform our culture, society, and world. And I feel like I'm home today with all of you. Yes, the problems are enormous, the challenges are real, but this is a time to create jobs and innovative technology, to develop renewable and circular uses of resources, and to envision and then build sustainable economies. I agree with Bertrand. If we look at this era as one of the most exciting times to be alive, instead of a terrifying one, then our entire attitude can be transformed. Our actions can leave a positive legacy for future generations. A decade ago, let me get my thing going here, sorry. A decade ago, I came up with a way to synthesize my photographic passions and environmental concerns through a multi-chapter project called Changing Perspectives. The double meaning is intentional, referring both to the ever-changing vistas of my aerial work and my goal of inspiring, informing, and shifting our paradigm vis-a-vis renewable energy. I focus on our efforts to create solutions to our most pressing environmental issues. The approach is crucial. It is the frame from which I choose to work. Each of us here today is part of a community, a matrix of individuals committed to creating a sustainable world for ourselves and future generations. Each of us has a distinct role. I am an artist, a documentary photographer, and perhaps, in renewable energy years, a photo historian. You might wonder at the notion of someone documenting renewable energy being a historian, a photo historian, but I choose projects based on how noteworthy they are at the time. My work does not predict the success or failure of a technology, a power plant, or the future direction of our energy transformation. If anything, it reveals how rapidly the technology, economics, and politics of energy are changing. Today, I want to share work with you from 3 projects: the evolution of IVANPAH Solar, Changing Perspectives Japan, and ATACAMA Renewable Energy and Mining in the High Desert of Chile. So let's start with IVANPAH. In many ways, the evolution of IVANPAH Solar remains one of my favorite projects in Changing Perspectives. With Las Vegas but a short flight away from New Mexico, I could easily return again and again to document the site over time. Over a period of 4 years, I flew 19 times over IVANPAH, photographing it from before construction began until it was generating electricity. I see IVANPAH as symbolic of the promise and challenge we face in building a sustainable civilization, both for ourselves and future generations. The IVANPAH Solar Electric Generating System, as its official name is, was a planned 392 megawatt concentrated solar power plant, nearly 20 times bigger than the next largest tower CSP plant in Spain. It would have 3 towers surrounded by 173,000 heliostats to superheat water, to drive steam turbines, to generate electricity. In 2010, at the start of this project, no one foresaw how quickly and dramatically the cost of photovoltaic and wind power would drop compared to concentrated solar power. Nor did we know how rapidly fracking and natural gas extraction would change the energy landscape. I hope to photograph construction on the ground, documenting 2,000 green jobs in the middle of the Great Recession, then take to the air to bring the 3,500-acre project into context. But site access to undertake a proper documentary project was not to be. This limitation, however, helped me recognize a greater opportunity. I realized the airspace over the IVANPAH project was public, a space where I could observe and photograph with few restrictions. I calculated what it would cost to document IVANPAH from the air. While the airspace above IVANPAH was free, helicopter charters and travel expenses were not. In 2011, I made the personal commitment, read that unfunded commitment, to document IVANPAH from start to finish. I couldn't know at the time how IVANPAH would come to engender both the promise and challenge of renewable energy development. As the project advanced, I encountered a full spectrum of opinions about IVANPAH and renewable energy. I noticed how each person viewed my photography through a unique paradigm. One person would be moved to tears or anger at IVANPAH Solar disturbing the desert landscape. Another would see the project as a great use of empty space. And still another would see solar energy as a waste of time and money when so much coal, oil, and natural gas is still available. Now, an ideal site for a project like IVANPAH might be close to existing transmission lines, near other existing infrastructure, and in an area that had already experienced significant human impact. This, I'm sure, was the goal of siting IVANPAH near Interstate 15, a golf resort, a dirt racetrack, and the casino town of Prim. Sites more remote and away from the public eye would have a significant impact on undeveloped areas of the Mojave Desert and were eliminated from consideration. But building IVANPAH would negatively impact the area's viewshed, the native desert tortoise population, and avian life in the basin. Let's take a look at the desert tortoise as an example. The basin is home to the tortoise, a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. Mitigation, that is, negotiations between the developers of IVANPAH, the federal government, and environmental groups, yield a commitment of $56 million over the project's life to designate protected lands for the tortoise, relocate them from the IVANPAH site, and undertake a long-term biological study to understand them better. This agreement, like so many projects, was a compromise. It's easy to get caught up in the details of renewable energy while neglecting the experience of photographing over a site like IVANPAH. So here's an excerpt from my artist statement about it. Each flight over IVANPAH was in a small helicopter. The pilot and I, a symbiotic team, weighing the visual goals of broad views and abstract details against the transitory light and weather, all while keeping safety a priority. I am drawn to first and last sunlight, oblique light that best reveals the textures, history, and secrets of the desert. For this, careful planning was essential. The airport from which we flew was a 30-minute flight from IVANPAH. To arrive before dawn with enough time to scout the site's progress and be ready to catch first sunlight required discipline and adherence to a strict schedule. Once the light was up, my sense of urgency mixed with the desire to intuitively interpret the landscape beneath me. Time was short, As the sun rose into the sky, shadows shortened, and the scene quickly became ordinary. Each new trip built upon earlier visits, with imagery layered upon earlier work, and steadily, the structures of the solar plant emerged. 3 140-meter towers arose, centers for their respective solar fields, while thousands of heliostats were installed around each. Well, halfway through the IVANPAH project, the New York Times Magazine decided to support the work. They published the first photo essay in 2012, and the project saw many publishing opportunities in the world after that. In late 2013, on the eve of the government shutdown, the curators from the Library of Congress purchased a portfolio of IVANPAH prints. And in 2015, The Evolution of IVANPAH Solar was published as a book by Steidl in Germany. My wager to document IVANPAH had paid off, and it became the first chapter of Changing Perspectives. Now let's shift gears and head to Japan. In 2016, I was invited to be a guest artist at the Mount Roko Photo Festival in Kobe, Japan. I couldn't pass up the opportunity to shoot for Changing Perspectives as part of the trip. Research logistics were challenging, and I couldn't have realized the results I did without the help of my great friend George Nobechi, who manifests the best of Japanese and Canadian cultures. Unlike the vast expanses of the American West, Japan is an island nation with a long and rich history. And while there's simplicity in my work over the American landscape, aerial photography over Japan represented a different and distinct challenge. How could I reveal the landscape's visual complexity while showing its unique approach to renewable energy? Japan's approach to stewardship of its land and water resources is distinct from the US. Their population density is 900 per square mile, while ours is only 35. The 2011 earthquake, tsunami, and subsequent Fukushima nuclear disaster caused the country to reassess its dependence on nuclear energy and its primary electric source. Beginning after that disaster, they looked to build renewable energy capacity, predominantly with photovoltaic projects, as one answer in their quest for alternatives. While the scale of projects in Japan may be small compared to projects in the US, they nevertheless reveal multiple opportunities for distributed generation and small-scale utility plants. During my project, I photographed around Tokyo, over the Chiba Peninsula, to the north in Ibaraki, and then around Kobe and Awaji Island in Hyogo Prefecture. Japan's photovoltaic projects pop up almost everywhere, next to rice fields and among greenhouses, in urban settings and industrial zones, on former golf courses and quarries, and on south-facing dams. And my favorite, floating photovoltaic projects. In Hyogo Prefecture alone, there are thousands of ponds and small reservoirs. Floating projects fit well among urban and agricultural lands, as they don't compete for scarce land resources. They reduce algae growth and are more efficient than land-based PV projects because of water's evaporative cooling effect. These projects were well adapted to the needs and culture of Japan's land stewardship. And now I want to give you a little interlude, just so you get an idea of how the heck I get up in the air. Nothing sexy about this. I prefer helicopters. They're my preferred mode for aerial work, especially with an open door where I can look right out and get a good aerial perspective. They range from the humble Schweitzer 300C, seen here, to crafts like the Robinson R44, and on up to twin-engine helicopters such as the Eurocopter. Just as a point of reference, we couldn't take off early in Japan. We had to wait till 9 o'clock from an official heliport, but we could take off at 5 o'clock in the morning from an abandoned tennis court near a love hotel. In Chile, the use of helicopters was cost prohibitive, and so we flew in a Cessna 210, an airplane with retractable landing gear and without an underwing strut, and this served us well. The diverse geography and geology of the Atacama Desert give it a unique set of attributes. Chile is the world's largest copper exporter and has the largest known lithium reserves. But with scant fossil fuel resources, the country has been dependent on fossil fuel imported coal, oil, and natural gas for its energy needs. Electricity generated on the Pacific coast using coal and natural gas is transmitted to mines and population centers throughout the north. This makes the development of domestic renewable energy an appealing option for the mining industry. Truth is, the Atacama Desert has some of the highest solar and wind potential on Earth. Since 2008, through a combination of government, policy, private investment, and public pressure, Chile's progress in renewable energy development is an example for other countries and mining operations worldwide. When the price of solar and wind projects became competitive with fossil fuel electricity production a few years ago, this trend accelerated. Between 2008 and 2020, non-hydrological renewable energy capacity in Chile grew by 1,900%. Well, many mines have converted or are converting to 100% renewable energy for both economic and environmental reasons. Thus, a growing dynamic between the extractive mining industry and the rapidly developing renewable energy sector make the Atacama a compelling subject for changing perspectives. By the time we flew over the Atacama's stark landscape in our small Cessna 210, I felt I already knew it intimately. For months, we had pored over satellite imagery to better understand the area's geography. From the coastal range, which blocks nearly all ocean moisture from the interior, to the expansive Salar de Atacama and soaring volcanoes of the Andes, the desert is distinctive. Unlike deserts of the American West, often veiled by creosote bush, pinon, and juniper, the Atacama reveals its geology with unabashed directness. No vegetation obscures its naked beauty. Over time, water and wind have shaped this land, and rain, though rare, often suggests itself as the dominant sculptor. Upon this striking geoscape, humankind imposes its will. Immense open pit mines provide copper to the world. Brine in the evaporation ponds of lithium mines will eventually power our computers and smartphones. Vast solar and wind energy projects are generating electricity for Chilean industry, commerce, and culture. From an aerial perspective, humankind's erratic stewardship of this land reveals the lasting scars of our desires, demands, and ignorance. As aerial projects go, the Atacama project had unique challenges. In order to start our work in earnest, we needed to fly the Cessna from Santiago up to Antofagasta. Fogged-in airports and refueling stops slowed our progress. Once in the north, we had to make a difficult compromise. Calama's airport was central to the locations I wished to photograph, but when they modernized the airport for commercial traffic, they took away services for general aviation. Thus, we flew out of Calama each evening and morning, leaving enough fuel to return to Antofagasta for refueling midday, an expensive and time-consuming inconvenience. The same forces that make the Atacama so attractive for energy projects, high winds, were another challenge. Morning and evening winds are powerful, which in open areas is not an issue, but high altitudes over complex geography, like Chuquicamata, is one of the world's largest open pit copper mines, can be problematic. Intense afternoon winds and downdrafts forced us to seek refuge and photograph midday when the winds were calmer. We were also limited by an altitude ceiling of about 14,000 feet for the Cessna. I had not correctly foreseen how the combination of these high base altitudes for mines and renewable energy sites, along with their enormous scale, would leave me craving to photograph at higher elevations. Most mines and renewable energy projects are physically distant from one another, but interconnected by the electrical grid. Frequent vibrations and high dust levels are incompatible with solar projects in particular, so my photography rarely shows the two side by side. Beyond energy projects and mines, the desert presented a plethora of enticing visual distractions: abandoned saltpeter mines, ATV tracks, and survey marks forming geometric patterns in contrast with natural geological designs. And always, I was looking for a few remaining sections of desert still untouched by humankind. It's easy to overlook how much research and planning go into a project. Everything leading up to the first photograph, months or years, serves to create openings for a few sacred hours of seeing. After all, the point of the journey was to document and visually interpret the mines, energy projects, and landscape of the Atacama. When I finally raised the camera to my eye, all the preparation and prior research moved to the background. I shifted to an intensely focused mode of observation, of quick and intuitive capture. So fleeting, so finite, these moments afforded me the chance to depart the tangible world for singular intervals of creative flow. Thank you for the chance to share my work with you today. In the years ahead, I will continue to focus our efforts on our collective efforts to create solutions to our energy dilemma. Our continued shift to renewable energy should be a swift and dramatic one. We don't know the answers, and we will make mistakes. But if we're committed, diligent, and collaborative, we may avoid disaster for our species and for the global ecosystem. Storytellers have the power to broaden our minds and shift the way we think about complex environmental issues. Through continued documentation of renewable energy and other climate change issues, I hope to contribute to the way we navigate our energy future. Thanks.